So I'd like to welcome you to our meeting today. The first after a couple of months break, after all the excitement of the centenary year. So yeah, so welcome, as I say again. We've got another series, another fantastic presentation today, and by Lance Halvorson. I'll tell you a little bit about Lance in a moment. What we're looking at doing is I'm building up a program between now and the end of the year, and we'll have our last Friends of Air Force History and Heritage on the last Friday of December, and I'm hoping for that to be something a little bit different, and I'm negotiating with the Australian Marine World on that one, so I'll keep you posted on that, and hopefully I'll build up the program over the next couple of months and send it out to everyone. So today, we're very privileged to have Lance Halvorson, MBE, with us today to talk about 2 Squadron in Vietnam, a little bit about Lance. And he originally joined the Citizens Air Force as a radio mechanic in 1956, joined the Permanent Air Force in 1962 and trained as a navigator, graduating in August 1963. Posted to Amberley for conversion on a Canberra aircraft, completed flying tours on Canberra jet bombers at Amberley and Butterworth from 64 to 66. Then he deployed to South Vietnam in April 67. After returning from Vietnam, he went to the USA, where he trained as a weapons systems officer on the F-111 with the US Air Force, returning to Australia in late 68. Returning again in 1970, he trained on the Phantom F-4E strike fighter in Arizona, Florida, before ferrying the aircraft across the Pacific to Australia in October of that year. After completing advanced NAV course in 1971, he spent 2.5 years as the NAV instructor at No. 2 Flying Training School at Pierce. He completed his second F-111 conversion at Amberley in December 74, and a weapons course at the Royal Air Force College, Air Warfare Cranwell in the UK. And in 75, he returned to Amberley as a weapons officer, and with No. 6 Squadron for 2 years before spending 3 years as weapons officer at headquarters. In 1980, he spent 3 years at the Department of Defence Canberra with his staff officer on the F-111 requirements, and he was awarded member of the British Empire in 1980 for his work in analysing the performance of the F-111 weapons system while at Amberley. He completed the Joint Staff course, then served as a staff officer. He served as staff officer to Sir Neville McNamara, and he was Sir Neville's last staff officer when he held the position for Defence Force. Lance retired as a wing commander in 1985, worked as a systems manager at Emergency Management Australia for 13 years as an IT contractor. He is the founding member of the Sir Richard Williams Foundation, president of the ACT branch of the Air Force Association. He then became the vice president. He was the editor for Wings magazine. You will be familiar with that, the Association's quarterly magazine. And for all his work, he's now a life member of the Air Force Association, but is still the webmaster for the ACT division. And Lance and his wife, Heather, reside in Canberra. And as some of you may have heard, if we came in a bit earlier, Lance went down to Point Cook just recently to see his grandson graduate as a weapons systems officer. So it's wonderful to see the younger generation following in the footsteps of their fathers and grandfathers. So it's wonderful. So congratulations, Lance. So Lance's presentation today is on 2 Squadron in Vietnam, and I think this should be really very, very interesting. So Lance, over to you, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Marianne. Well, it makes me wonder where I fitted all those things in all those years, but that's what happens when you stay around for a long time and stay vertical. Now, do you want me to start the presentation now?
Yes.
Squadron Operations in South Vietnam, 67, 71. Most people might have been around when the government announced the decision back in December 66. This time I and most of the squad had been there in Butterworth for 2 years. And some of us went home. Government announced a decision December 66. 6 squadron crews back in Amberley went back to Butterworth, early 67, and did more flying in Butterworth, which we've been doing for the last 2 years, and went to Fanrang in 19 April 67. A lot of the work we've been doing in Butterworth for 2 years was quite dissimilar to what we were going to do in Vietnam until we started to work with the forward air controllers later in the year. The first year we were there, low-level sorties, bombing with the FAC. Previously, most of the work was radar control bombing called combat sky spot to medium altitude, mostly at night, sometimes during the day. And we really didn't see much evidence of bomb damage assessment. Sometimes we didn't even know what the target was. But certainly when the FAC was bombing, we were bombing with the FAC, he didn't know either. So it was all pretty hit and miss affair, no identifiable targets. That's the way it was. Anyway, we were based at Fanrang Air Base, as you can see, not far from Cayman Bay, quite a long way from Vung Tau where the helicopters and caribous were. And we were with the US 35th Attack Fighter Wing, Fanrang Air Base. The day we arrived from Butterworth to Fanrang, 8 aircraft, we all joined up in formation and pitched out, landed to a great ceremony on the base, welcoming us, and everything went well. That's our aircraft. Not a good picture. World War II style stuff. You see all the instrumentation and all the lights around it, rheostats for the lights at the top. It was totally bizarre, but that's what we had. We would have preferred that. F-22 cockpit.
Good morning, Vietnam!
The lines in Fanrang. You can see there the 2 squadron lines in the blue on the far left, USAF lines. USAF had F-100s, B-57 Canberra, B-57Bs. It was quite different from our Canberras. Transports and FACs on the far right-hand side. The runway to the right, you can see with AM2 panels, aluminium panels. Landing and taking off on those was something else. See the predominant direction for the runway. All fighter pilots landed on the threshold, or tried to. Our domestic quarters, the officers' quarters on the right, and the all shared dining facilities down the end here, all built by 5 ACS, all within 3 months. Outstanding job they did. We, aircrew and techos built the sandbags. People might recognise him, young Frank Burt. We all built the sandbags under direction from the ground defence guys, of course, and we used them fairly often. They're all outside our quarters. The ablution block in the background. There's a bunch of the guys driving after a sortie. It was a bit staged, this one, but that's a bunch of people there at the time. CO's not there. LGH, myself, second from the right. You might not recognise too many people. But it's future Chief of Air Force, Earl McCormack's sitting right at the back, far left. We're all flying officers at that stage. Oh, not all of us. We had a couple of squad leaders in there and some flight attendants. And we had a total of 12 crews flying 9 to 10 sorties a day and night. Most of ours was night. That's an American B-57B built by Martin to English electric specifications up to a point. They had a rotary bomb door and clamshell cockpit, as you can see. Different engines. They had a top speed of 520 knots, where we were limited to 450. Not that we ever used 450 into Vietnam. Now this that was a B-57 starting up, not on fire. Here's a typical map we used operating out of Fan Ring. All navigation was point-to-point TACAN. We used to operate with the control and reporting centres. They weren't controlled, they were just flight following. Somebody said, "You guys control us?" And he said, "Hell no, we just tell you where to go and we just referee." So they didn't offer any control at all until in the circuit area. Everything else was see and be seen. Low down, on return, we do a TACAN GCA into the base, or visual, during the day, visual approach, but mostly at night was all IF approach, TACAN GCA off the TACAN channel. Everything was done on TACAN. The setup, exception of some of the bombing equipment, and armour plating, all the aircraft were war ready, as were most of the crews. We've been training and flying around Vietnam, Malaysia for 2 years, in Australia, some of us for another year. I put in a nitrogen purging system into the fuel system, and the engines we had to retrim for the different type of fuel. And that's the base. We all parked in revetments. The bomb crew, we preparing the bombs. All the bombs were initially Second World War status. They all are 500 pounders and 1,000 pounders. And a lot of us suspect the only reason we went to Vietnam was because, well, one of the main reasons was to get rid of the bombs we had from Second World War. Because had to do something with them. That's an example of, we had a few problems with them. Tails falling off. So I'll get onto that a bit later.
How can you fight a war on this shit? I don't know where they are. I don't even know where I am. Can't speak dick.
Robin Williams was one of my fans. That was him talking. There's LG8, myself, checking out the bombs in the bomb bay. We used to carry 6 of those. No, nose and tail fused. All World War II. They're 500 pounders by the look of it. In the base, we did operating level maintenance, was all done at Fan Ring. Any intermediate maintenance was done back at Butterworth with, by then, 478 Squadron. And all the DLME servicing, as it was called then, we all flew back. They were flown back to 380 in Australia. The Canberra really just filled a gap in the US inventory. They didn't have any aircraft that did much what we did. They all dive bombed. We didn't do any dive bombing, no gun sight. The aircraft wasn't really stressed for it. Americans did use PGMs in Vietnam, the early ones, but they had varying successes with those. There's a view of myself and Wally Wallace, pilot I used to fly with. We didn't have any big flak jackets. We carried a Mae West and Sabi and pistols, and that was about it. Mini flares. The ejection seat used to have an emergency radio in it, which if you ejected and the parachute opened, it would give a beep so the SAR guys could find out, at least know where we're somewhere. In the aircraft system, the navigator did all the weapons work. weapons panel selection, aiming, releasing. The pilot just had the master arm switch. Basically, he had release consent. Some of the bombs, we had a lot of problems with bombs. Wally and I in particular had one that had a hang up, taken out the jettison area, went through a bit of turbulence on descent. The bomb dropped off, hit the bomb doors, which were closed, bent forward, hit the bomb door jack, and we thought, God, this is it. But it didn't explode, obviously. But when it went out to the jettison area, it did. We had a lot of problems with tails falling off, bombs jostling into bomb bay, hang-ups, all sorts of things. But some went off, and there you can see 3, 500 pounders, I think they were. American system in Vietnam, they took bombs out. They never brought any home. If they didn't have a target to release on, they jettisoned all bombs. We, in our wisdom, brought some back, which is not a good idea. Eventually changed the concept policy later, not bringing it back any bombs. US Air Force was quite impressed with the accuracy of the camera. So we went into operations with the forward air controllers in close support of the Australian Task Force in Nui Dat area, or the ATO. They were called boomer operations. And the US Air Force and Australian FACS, and we just dropped the bombs on their smoke. There was no aim point anywhere in any of the targeting that we had. It was all smoke or radar directed. At low level, we used to drop, this release here is about 4,000 to 5,000 feet by the look. We did go down to about 1,000 feet, but the frag envelope of the bomb was about 2, depending on the bombs, up to 2,000 or 3,000 feet. We went down, in some occasions, down to 800. And the time of fall from 800 is pretty short, like 6 seconds. And if you don't pull up quickly, which we had to do, you'd wear some of the fragments. Some guys did. They're lucky, actually, we didn't lose any aircraft. There was all sighting on this particular occasion, this is down at Canal Line. It's all done on the smoke put in by the FAC. The FACs didn't get the smoke in the right place all the time, so they might say, oh, no, you drop it 50 metres or 20 metres, 100 or something past the smoke. And so it was all often, if it didn't miss. Last of the old bombs, 27,000 of them. And that's Jim Akert on the left and Terry Farquharson on the right. That's when we got rid of them. That took about 18 months to get rid of all the old bombs. World War II, British design. They weren't designed for high speed. That's why we had a lot of problems.
Inboard a bit.
Those bombs were American, as these are, 750-pound bombs, Mark M117s. We could only carry 4 in the weapons bay because they were so long, and carried 2 in the wingtips, making a total of 6. The earlier British bombs, we carried up to 10 to 500 pounders. Normal load was 8. But we had a lot of release bombs that the bomb carriers were using. And then when we ran out of the World War II bombs, we went to these. That's the 117 off the wingtip. You can still just see the arming wires. That's pretty low release. Also engaged in what called night hour sorties. Night hours were bombing at night under flares. We have a C-47 or C-119 dropping upwind at 4,000 feet. Now with a forward air controller at 2,000, and Canberra we come in at 3,000, drop under flares. It was almost like daylight. But once the flares went out and you got out of the circle of the flares, you were back right in the dark again. So it was a bit of a transition problem from brilliant light to brilliant, real dark. It was not good at all. But we did a lot of those, and I don't know how successful they were.
0916, stay clear of the way, tack in 259 degrees for 50 nautical miles, 515 nautical miles up to flight level 310 until 2055 Zulu, Panama out. Roger, latest weather is 5,000, scattered, high, then overcast at 15, winds calm, altimeter 2984. Back 2984. Don't you believe that weather forecast either? We don't have a forecast anymore. I mean the weather observation. There ain't no clouds at 5,000 feet.
That was typical of the conversations, the transmissions we used to get. Control and Reporting Centre used to issue artillery areas, typically range and bearing radials from the TACAN station. Keep right away from those because the shells used to go up to 35,000 feet. And we suspect some of us might have seen them at different times. I didn't. Early morning arrival. You can see we're landing to the south there. Not the most used runway because there's no skid marks on the threshold here. So the pilots misjudged that one. Not the predominant runway, but our blocking areas are over here to the far right, the picture. We used to fly all hours of the day and night. Cam and Husky, people may have seen those. They were strictly SAR in the circuit area. And they're definitely counter-rotating propellers. And the outer blades used to reach down almost to head height. So you had to be very careful how you approach them. This guy lost a nose wheel. Mike Burks. Something, or Mike was killed in the Tiger Moth crash some years later. But the Americans want to get a bulldozer in and shift this off the tarmac because they were stopping their operations with F-100s. Till the CO moved in and said, Jack Post, no, we've only got 9. Don't push that off. So he saved the day. Whilst we were there, did a number of visits, and this particular one we went up to Dalat, which is where one of the radar bombing stations was located on a liaison visit. This is a house that an Army warrant officer and one of the advisors to the Vietnamese Army. We were going to stay with him this night, but he was satchel charged the night before, so we elected not to stay there. We went to the Dalat Palace Hotel across the road. Far better. That's myself in here with Ron Bedell, Bob Waring. Bob, unfortunately, he was killed in the F4 crash some years later. That's the view from the terrace deck of the Palace Terrace. You wouldn't think there was a war going on. In Dalat, there wasn't. One of the rice growers, we're not sure whose side he is on. And they had market gardens and all the rest. A couple of the damsels past the market garden, but they supplied a lot of the fresh vegetables all over. And USAF even bought some of those to provide in our messes down in Fanrang. We visited the USAF team, and they were manning the MSQ 77, the ground radar which controlled us in sky spot bombing. And they lived in this an old French villa. And we went out there for dinner. Typical American food, not terribly great. That's the standard of accommodation they lived in. Some of the flight safety aspects of Vietnam that we came in, we only had positive control in the circuit only. Control and reporting centre, as I mentioned before, was flight following, see and be seen. Take our own separation. At night, that was quite difficult. The Squadron Operations room, our squadron, not the Americans, we determined routes how to get there. We flew the normal standard procedures, quadrantal leveled up to 29,000. We always did the RAAF approach, TAC and GCA. We often met other aircraft in the same place. Wally and I had an EMS there, we looked out there. We both called to the same location, the initial approach fix. Looked out and there's a B-57 about 150 feet away. So we took appropriate action. But it was fraught at night because you didn't know where they were. You got traffic advisories, that was all. VFR, well, of course, during the day we'd do our own descent. Heads up flying, regardless, day or night, because there was so much traffic. The targets we had, most of them were soft skin target. Obviously soft skin targets, people, aircraft, futures, but no facilities, structures or whatever of any amount, because there weren't any. Most of them were troop concentration, rally points, someone's guesswork. Vehicles and infiltration routes, lots of those. But at night we couldn't see them. We didn't have any radar. Base and storage areas, supply headquarters, once again, dependent on target reports, intel reports, and coordinates given to the radar system. Bunkers and VC caves, futures. But one of the main areas certainly in the visual bombing during the day, later in the time, and almost 75–80% of the sorties, about mid-68, with the Australian troops in the area in the Phuoc Thi province, a lot of them with troops in contact. And that's where the Canberra came to the fore in a lot of respects. And it was a very accurate bomber, and we could drop single bombs rather than a stick or a train release, as the Americans called it. We could drop single bombs, but it means we have to go around the racetrack 6 times. Fortunately, generally there's no one shooting at us. In that way, we did save a lot of people's troops from being overrun by VC. A lot of the success of any of the sorties in the American system, you may have heard, was really based on bomb damage assessment, was really KBA, killed by air. And that's where the Americans got everything a bit awry over the years, in that they determined the success of operations in Vietnam was built by the body count. In fact, it wasn't. There you go. Last sortie, 31 May. So we're there for just about over 4 years. Nearly 12,000 sorties, large number of bombs, 26,000 roundabout those were World War II stocks. A lot of people say, why did we go to Vietnam in the first place? I think the Joint Planning Committee had different conversations at times about supporting the Americans in Vietnam. Token, never any illusion that we're going to provide or make any big difference. But notwithstanding, Canberra did extremely well. In the wing, we flew about 5% of the sorties of the 35th TAC Fighter Wing, but resulted in about 16% of their success, bomb damage assessment or KBA. So we did reasonably well. And the aircraft bombing accuracy was very good. Why did we go there? The cynics would say, with some degree of truth, I guess, we had to get out of Butterworth. The Mirages were going there. They had to take over the crew room facilities and the hangar facilities. There was no place to send the Canberras, no place back in Amley. We're getting ready for the F-111 then. What did we do with them? Then we had to get rid of all the bombs. So it was discussed one time that maybe the Sabres should go or the Mirages. The Mirages were just coming in. No good. They couldn't go far anyway. No interceptors. Sabres, well, get 40-minute sortie, drop a couple of bombs. So the Canberras were the best bet. No one really realised what the Canberras could do. We crews and Butterworth, we all knew what they could do, but most people didn't. But interestingly, we went and engaged in roles in Vietnam, a role for which we never trained. But the aircraft did extremely well. Some of the reasons why: it was very stable at altitude, good bomb load, most of the Americans carried 2. Long endurance, we could fly up and down Vietnam and hawk our bombs 3.5 hours. We could level bomb under the weather. The Americans didn't have any aircraft that could do that until the F-111s came in. And we could bomb from 1,000 to 4,000 feet. So we could release single bombs in a stick, reliable, accurate, and it filled a gap. One of the things you don't do, this happened at night. Fortunately, we were in a Pan Am 707 on our way out flying home. An F-105, I think a modern F-100, landed through the C-120 on the runway, and it's devastating results. So you have to be very sure. The traffic there was horrendous at Tan Son Nhut. They crashed at night. Magpie 9-1, I was involved in a bit with that with Jim Burke, the Operation Aussie's Home, to bring MIAs back from Vietnam. There were only 2 at RAAF that we knew about. Herbert and Carver. I assisted Jim Burke in finding out where it was, and my knowledge about where they should be. That's what we figured they would be around about that area. But as it turned out, they were found about 3 or 5 kilometres away from that. That's a Google map. So we eventually found them, and that's bringing them home. That's an article. That was a strip from the South Australian newspaper. At the time, they got the remains from Mike Herbert and Bob Carver. Mike was buried in a full service funeral in Adelaide, and Bob remains in Toowoomba. We always reflect on what we did over the time. I've been discussing all this, talking this with the RAAF staff college over the years, and these are the reflections I have and with the aircraft. We had problems with the bombing equipment. The aircraft, low survivability. We didn't go in the north, we went to the DMZ, and that's where we lost 2. No radar warning receiver. We didn't have radar. We had heightened speed limits on the ejection seat. Although the 2 guys who ejected, they survived, but they were ejected from about 20,000 feet. Imperative we have a good concept of operations and a command system in place. It's been said many times and reiterated again, you got to train for the ward like your operations. You just can't pick it up when you get there. Experience is essential. Not everybody has the experience required. Fortunately, initially with 2 Squadron, we did. All the guys have been in Butterworth for at least a year flying low-level sorties. They knew the Asian situation. Vietnam was a bit different, of course, but we did have that background. And you need a good training system. There wasn't any on-the-job training in Vietnam. You got there to fly the ground crews as well. And technical support as we had on the ground in Phan Mang, also in Butterworth, but including back in Australia. All essential. But the guys did extremely well. That's the end of my presentation, Marianne, Peter. I'll stop the share.
Yes, please.
Terrific. Yeah, terrific. Look, thank you, Lance. It's not often we get an on the ground perspective. You know, we can sit there and read a history book and, you know, this is what 2 Squadron did and they were responsible. But to actually get a first person account is always absolutely riveting all the time. That was just fantastic. There's a couple of things that stood out for me, that the bit of the haphazard nature of it, particularly in the beginning. You know, you didn't know what you were bombing. 12 crews, 9 to 10 sorties a day, a little bit of haphazard. The use of the Second World War bombs, getting rid of the, you know, the old ones. The problems with them being hung up. Thank heavens you survived that particular one when it was hung up, and then exploded. You were saying later on when you went to drop it over the jettison area, it exploded. That must have been a bit hairy. But the thing that impressed me was you said, you know, the Canberras filled the gap, and the other thing was you know, when you think about almost 12,000 sorties, 76,000, you know, 389 bombs for a role which we're never really properly trained in. I think, boy, that says a lot for, you know, for that, what, 18 months you were there, or the 3 years in total? Yeah.
I was there 7 months.
Yeah.
2 years in Butterworth, 7 months in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Excuse me, we all came home and went to USA and trained on the F-111.
Yeah.
That's why we only stay half the time.
Yeah. And I think your observation of, you know, what are we going to do with the Canberras? Oh, you know, we've got the F-111s coming into Amberley. You know, what are we going to do? Just shove them off to Vietnam, send them to do something that, you know, with an allied force that we're not really trained to do. But, you know, you really impressed the Americans. So what a fantastic story. So
that's my cynical view, Marianne.
Oh, no. You know, there's Michael might be able to help me here, but there was an historian of note once that said, if you want to get the real story of the war, you've got to talk to the veterans who did it. You know, so not necessarily the historians who gather the official word and get it down. So fantastic, Lance. Thank you. So any questions, please put your hand up or just signal on the chat that you'd like to ask a question. Michael.
Well, since you just brought my name into it, Marianne, thank you. And Lance, I can only but echo Marianne's words. They were just wonderful hearing you speak so vividly about Vietnam, and people like myself who have an interest in the field know so little about what it was like to actually be there, and you really brought it home. I want to ask, just on a purely kind of human level, what were the conditions like? I mean, the climate and the rain and the muck and the humidity. How did you deal with that?
We were fortunate. In fact, we had good quarters. We had the only flush toilets in Vietnam for the military. We had good quarters. We did a lot of work. We had to tile the floors and put in air conditioners and tile and painted all this. We built the paths to the toilets, but all sorts of stuff. The behind the scenes stuff that we did, I didn't mention all about all that. We weren't sitting on our hands all the time. The weather, we were fortunate. We didn't have such a bad weather. We're in the middle of, we're in the dry season, the period I was there. Later on, it got hot and humid. It was always hot. When we were flying at night, half the time when the lot of thunderstorms. We didn't know we were in them until the lightning fired up and we sat right in the middle of it all, or we were right in the middle of the turbulence. A lot of times on the bomb run, we couldn't see it all once you're in the cloud. But it wasn't all bad. It was okay. We dealt with it.
I was very interested to hear you say that by your description, Lance, a lot of the sorties seem to be quite haphazard. You were just kind of told to go out there and given a rough.
Well, they weren't haphazard, really. We did get targeting from the US headquarters, 7th Air Force in Saigon, but it all came from village chiefs, not village chiefs, but what do they call them? Area chiefs of the Vietnamese that had to go through the MACV headquarters. They had to be all endorsed by the Vietnamese. And we got what was called a frag order each night from the American Mustang Arms. Yeah, we got a target. Here's your target, and give us the rendezvous point to the basically with the combat sky spot operators, controllers up in a lot of them up in all over, but right near the DMZ. That was a high pucker factor up there at night because you couldn't see anything at night, of course. We didn't go there during the day, but down in the other areas it was okay. It was always an RV point with the fact we handed off the forward air controller. So it wasn't all hardship and all the rest of it. It was reasonably, we had total air superiority, we had a bit of ground fire, rocket attacks, firing out on landing and takeoff, but you pass all that away and forget about all that. And basically we just got on with the job, and yeah, it wasn't that him, it wasn't that bad. A lot of us were used to it all because we've been in Butterworth for 2 years. So it was just another continuation of what we've been doing, except the targeting was different. The identification was different. We did a lot of HE bombing when I was in Butterworth. We used to fly to Borneo, all around Malaya, China Rock. We did 2 weeks of every year we were bombing in the cameras in Butterworth. Practice bomb. We'd be fly to Borneo, Lab 1, dropping high explosive bombs. So it really was just another thing as far as a lot of us were concerned. We just got on with it.
Yeah,
the younger blokes that came up later on, they probably had maybe different problems.
Yeah, Fredo, sir, you've got a question to ask.
Hey, Marianne, thanks for that. Hey, Lance, great presentation. Loved it. Really, really interesting. We keep saying that we just don't get that. And I think Mike was saying the hands-on stories about Vietnam and the like, and it's great to hear firsthand story. I suppose my question is, how was the interaction with the Americans? I've read a book it's about the Army helicopters that are up there. And they talked about how the Americans got really frustrated with the Australians because they, we didn't fit into the way they would do things. And there's a particular story where he talks in this particular book where the Australians were being told off all the time because they kept calling the fuel tankers away. So they went and requisitioned a fuel tanker. And then apparently a week or so later, the CO came out and basically said, I don't care who it was who requisitioned it, but the Americans want Ned Kelly to return their fuel tanker. How did you find interacting with them and their processes?
We didn't interact a lot with them other than up at the officers' club at night. We did interacted a bit there. They always wanted to come down to our mess because they thought it was much better than theirs. We didn't have any problems with them. A lot of people say Americans gave us everything. They didn't. We paid for our food. At the end of the month, when the food reserves got down a bit, there was pretty awful food. We paid a 10% admin fee on the base as well. So we paid for their administration. We paid our way. We used to get a bit of access here and there. We didn't interact with them largely. With the wing commander now and again we did. We used to go to a stand-up briefing every day. It was called a stand-up briefing because the wing commander, the American wing commander, didn't want people hanging around too long. And that was we interacted there with them. There are a lot of stories that come out of it, which you can't talk about, but we had no problem with the interaction with them. As far as the helicopters concerned, people don't understand that the American helicopters, the American Army rather, with their helicopters, they had 500 and 600 up to 1,000. In the war, they lost about 5,000 helicopters. We had 9. You can't operate the same. And the Americans were cowboys, and it was an airborne cavalry. Ours weren't. Now, you need to talk to Bruce Lane to get more details about all that. He's got all that information. We didn't have much to do with the helicopter guys at all. So I can't answer those questions, but I know that we did access a lot of things with the American, a carton of stubbies, tuies, or whatever, got you a lot of places. It got you many places. You get a lot for that. Now you even get a Jeep. We traded a 9mm pistol and got a Jeep. That's how things operated there.
Robert, you've got a question.
Not so much a question, but Lance, I was in the army up there, and I was seconded to Squadron on the communication side of things for
All right, okay.
a few weeks in July 70. And by that time, you'd expended all the Australian bombs. I only ever saw the 750s. But obviously, I was only in the OR's mess, but the cooks loved me because your food was so much better than army food that I was carried around the base at one stage and dunked in the pool when it was time for me to leave. But my arrival there, I was welcomed by a rocket. Wound up off the side of the perimeter road, hiding in a ditch at one stage.
Oh, right, okay.
So, yeah, hot, sweaty, etc. You know, you can't get anywhere near the place now. It's currently an Air Force base still, and very off limits.
It's interesting you talk about the pool and all this. When I got there was nothing. We built nothing. The ACS was still building the mess. We did a lot of, aircrew and the tech guys as well. We had no pool. There was no outdoor area. There was nothing. We built most of it. We built the paths of the evolutions and that, put up blocks and all the rest of it, petitions and all sorts of things. When I was there, it was rough. There was nothing there. Headquarters and trucks driving past and noise and dust flying everywhere and jets flying everywhere. It got better as the time went on. I haven't been back since now, and it was pretty dusty and awful. The road out the front. I remember one meeting, a CO said to the wing commander, "Can we get this area, the drive in front of the Aussies mess and quarters tarred?" Well, they didn't bitumise it; they tarred it. And the Red Horse guy said, "Oh yeah, that'll probably take us probably about 2 weeks." And the wing commander said, "You got till 6 in the morning," and it was done. They worked all night. So these sorts of things happen. You don't see all this other stuff behind the scenes. There's nothing's in the books or anything. So we did have our technical blokes particularly had a good rapport with the Americans. A slab of tuies would get you lots of things. And a 9mm pistol, I said, got us a Jeep. Went down and back.
Thanks, Lance. Lloyd, you've got a question.
No, I don't have a question. I particularly want to commend you, Lance, on the beautiful presentation. Brought back a few memories. I was with 9 Squadron in '69.
Right.
And yes, it was quite some weird war, wasn't it?
Well, I'm putting a lot in my memoirs now. My grandson, I gave it to him when he was on officer training school, and he said, "I want a bit more information on that." And I said, "Well, I'm working on it."
Yeah, I've put out a book actually, which covered my tour in Vietnam, and that picture up behind's the
Right.
when I was a 20-year-old fought part in the Korean War.
Oh wow!
With 77 Squadron.
Wow.
And I do have a book, and if anybody likes to contact me, I'll give them a free copy of Diary of a Pilot, it's called.
Yeah, and also this one by Lloyd. Is that the one?
Oh, that's a novel. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I grabbed the wrong one. Got it here.
I'm starting to put some.
There it is.
To put facts in, I guess, a lot of the strike aircraft we had, because I spent time on the 111, the Phantoms, and the Canberras. I'm going to put down the story of it all, but the real story, not the normal stuff.
Yeah.
Without getting into too much detail.
Oh no, get into all the detail, Lance. Absolutely. Absolutely. Even if you've got to embargo it for years, put it all down, mate, because that's so important. That is so important, so that we don't just get the glossy overview and, you know, weren't we fantastic and didn't we do this and all the rest of it. That is so important.
Well, my old course mate, Alan Stevens, has written a lot on it. He and I were on NAV course together.
Yeah.
Al Stevens was in Vietnam at the early Asian officer with the Army Brigade at Nui Dat when I first got there, and we brought the cameras in. So he knows a fair bit about the background.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Lance, we've got a guy who works in Air Force. He's a public servant. His name's Todd Hunter. He's starting to research the history of the Canberra. So we're looking to put a book out similar to the F111 book that Mark Lax did. So if you're happy, we might put Todd in contact with you.
Yeah, of course. I've put out a CD on the history of the Canberra, and I've done articles in Wings magazine. I've got an interactive CD in it, and I've got a DVD on the history of T-Squadron for 100-year history. So I've got a fair bit of that stuff in there. Okay. I know there's a lot being said about it. There's a lot out there that isn't correct. And I guess I've got the bits which are correct. But that's a lot of it's opinion and facts. But yeah, I put him in. Did you say Todd Hunter?
I think it's Todd Hunter. Hunter.
Yeah, Todd Hunter was a flight commander in T-Squadron in Vietnam.
Yeah, no, he's not that old. He's working in the Air and Space. Yeah, it might be. He works in the Air and Space Power Centre, so he's doing some research. And I think Alan Stevens.
Name, and I'm sure it could be related.
Okay, I'll put him in contact with you.
Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, any more questions there, or anything you'd like to talk? Yes, Phil.
Thanks, Marianne. And Lance, fascinating presentation. Thank you. And I hate to say that I was only 3 years old when the Canberras went to Vietnam. However, I have a question, kind of a semi-technical question about weapons delivery, both visually and on the combat sky spot operations, and exactly how that was managed in the aircraft.
Well, we had a weapons control panel down the back firewall, which the navigator set up. We used to nose tail fuse. We used to check the bombs, of course, in the bomb bay to know what bombs we had, what the terminal velocity was, what the ballistics of the bomb were. We'd set those up in what was called the 1224 control panel. We'd set the bombs up for train delivery, single delivery, fusing, whatever it was. We could then, in the nose, we could then have access to, there was a bomb site computer, which used to feed from the Doppler, which is drift, and the ballistics used to drop from that with an aiming reticle and a collimator in the system, in the bomb site. And we used to direct it visually, direct the pilot verbally, ask visually to get onto the target. It's always pretty hard to get the right. The pilot had to maintain precise speed and altitude. And we just giving heading corrections. And the speed was critical. And altitude for the weapon we had. Sometimes the too low level, technically the Doppler used to hunt a little bit, and the sight reticle would move a bit. So we then went to what we called fixed sight. Fixed sight meant exactly that. You had to fly precisely to the parameters for that to get the weapons released. Interestingly, we used to use that on the F4 Phantom with a yaw string. In this highfalutin aircraft, that makes sort of get a yaw string out in the front of the aircraft and fixed sight to get the bombs on the target. So not a lot of change in that regard. But that's how we did it. And we did all the corrections. We had all the set the panel up. We did all the releases from the nose. The pilot had release consent. That was all he had. But to fly the airplane accurately. That was our bit. So that would answer your question briefly.
And what about the combat sky spot drops?
Well, much the same. We'd set the panel up at the back. We'd stay in the ejection seat this time. So we'd set the panel. We could just reach off the sidewall. We'd set up the panel, whatever they wanted. We used to drop a stick of 6 there. We didn't drop single. We used to drop a stick of 6. Sometimes 4, come back for another 2. We'd never drop singly. A stick of 6, we just set it up to the parameters of ballistics that we gave, that were given to the Sky Spot guys, They used to use what was called, it really was a radar bomb score, which the Strategic Air Command used to use when the SAC guys used to do their bombing runs. And this radar bomb score would measure how accurate they were. Well, they reversed the role of it. So they then said, well, we know where you are, we'll direct you. So that's what they did. And we gave them the bomb ballistics. And we used to fly at 270 knots indicated. So around about 320 knots true airspeed. All the bombs were 350, I forgot the exact speed. All the bombs were released on that parameter. If they were the same type, they used to vary, 1,000-pounders, 500s. When we went to the American ones, well, that was different again. So it was a bit technically to get it right.
So did they vector you onto the attack heading and then call the drop?
We gave it an RV with a control reporting centre. They'd hand us off to the MSQ 77 site, the radar site. They would then set us up in a race pack pattern or long range, run-in. Yes, they would. They'd vector us in with verbal commands to the pilot. 1 degree left, said he'd hold it there. And the pilot was responsible for the speed and altitude. The radar site was responsible for the heading. That was it. And then to give a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hack, and off we go. We wait for the timer to fall, roll the aircraft over, which was illegal, we shouldn't have been doing it. For about 25 seconds, roll 90 degrees, have a look, see whether the bombs exploded or not, or we got a secondary explosion, or sometimes we didn't even see them in the jungle canopy. Some penetrated so far you couldn't see the explosion, you might see a pinprick. Some you kind of got a big flash, depends on the bombs and the target. That was it. That was the validation. We then know there was a hang up by the shutters on the weapons release system to tell us if we had a hang up. And then we'd find out later too, as we did when the bloody thing dropped off. Hit the doors. Not a good sound when the door hit the doors. They have a 6-foot arming wire and it fell from the rear station about 6 feet to go to the back. All the bombs were armed. That means if you hit something heavy, fortunately, as they drop, they explode.
Okay. Well, we're glad you survived that one, Lance. That's good. Otherwise, I don't think you would have gone down to Point Cook to see your grandson. Peter.
Yeah, just a quick one for Lance. Lance, did you get many bombs that did not explode?
Yeah. Sometimes it was a bit hard in Sky Spot. It was a bit hard to tell because we tried to count them, but in the jungle canopy they get absorbed. Yeah. So you might get 5 or 4, but 6. That was it. We had a lot that dropped off. Tails fell off. Some of them dropped off on the way there. No one reported anything. As somebody asked the wing commander, do you have a bombing range here? And a bombing range is a war zone for Christ's sake. And he said, yes, sir. It's 600 kilometres long and 200 kilometres wide. That's what it was. It was a bombing range.
Yes.
Sorry, Lance, when you say tails fell off, tails of the bombs or the bomb?
So with World War II things and a lot of jury rigged Heath Robinson stuff, they were firing lugs off, single lug suspensions. It was a bloody nightmare, the bombs, and it was a good thing to take them to Vietnam to get rid of them. Not good for the people, but good for us because our ordnance blokes would have to go there and defuse them all and get rid of them. But no UXBs were plotted. No. That could be, who knows? I've got no idea.
Thank you.
The 750s had retractable tails, didn't they? And they popped out on, so they fitted in the.
No, they're standard fins. Don't get confused with the high drag bombs. They were out tails. We didn't drop those. We dropped them. I dropped them a lot of those in the F-111s. They were high drag bombs with about their tails. We could drop them down to 150 feet in the F-111 and the Phantoms, but we didn't drop those in Vietnam. The Americans did. We didn't.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, yes, Phil, you've got another question?
All
or
right, another quick
information?
question. Did the Canberra have any sort of recce camera or post-strike camera that you could photograph the bombing results?
Oh, well, we had onboard cameras. Yeah, yeah, we had a big format camera, 8x10, or we had 5-inch cameras, depending on what you wanted. Yeah, we had all that. Every sortie was photographed in the daytime. That is.
So you didn't use photo flashes?
No, Phantoms used to use photo flashes for recce. We didn't. We used to bomb under flares from the flare ship. Not often, but that was like going into a bright room into the dark. We didn't do that very often. The Americans used to dive bomb at night, 30-degree dive bombing in B-57s under flares at night. That was something else. And I've dive bombed in Phantoms at night, not in that situation, different situations. I know what it's like. It ain't all beer and Skittles. So, no, we didn't do any of that. We just took pictures during the day of every release.
Ladies and gentlemen, is there any more questions there or that you'd like to pose to Lance? Thank you. Well, look, again, I just say, as I said before, to get first-person accounts of a campaign is just fantastic. And thank you, Lance. And I was going to say to you, please make sure you write your memoirs, but you've done all that, and I'm going to send an email. I'm going to send an email to your grandson and say, good on you. Make sure he does, and he'll nag you to do it. That's wonderful. So, on behalf of History and Heritage Branch, thank you so much, and please show your appreciation, everyone, as much as we can there while we Zoom. So thank you, Lance. It's been fantastic. Just a couple of other thank yous too. I'd like to thank Peter Dunn, who's recorded Lance's presentation today. It'll be recorded under Peter's Oz at War website as a unlisted presentation.
Yeah, but I won't link it on the website. It'll be unlisted, and we'll just send to individuals and ask them not to post it on social media.
Yeah, I wouldn't like it to be out there on that.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. Thanks very much, Peter, and thank you for the tutoring that you've been giving myself and some of our presenters. And Peter's become my go-to bloke for how do I do this on Zoom. So
we did wonders with me, and my son was here to help a bit, and my son in USA gave me a couple of tips last night. But that was good. But Peter did well, and I want to thank Peter for all that, and thank you, Marianne, for the opportunity to talk. I've been giving this talk to the RAAF staff college in Pitt and Orford, and know over the years, about 10 or 12 of them over the time. So I've got it all. There's lots of information there, and you only got half of it.
Terrific. Thank you, Lance. Just a bit of a plug before I go. If you get onto the Air Force or the RAAF website, look down to 2021, you'll see the RAAF Base Richmond are doing a history symposium on over the 30th of June to the 1st of July. They're doing a walking tour of RAAF Base Richmond on the 4-hour walking tour on the 30th of June, and there's a history symposium on the 1st of July, and Martin James, the Air Force historian, is giving one of the presentations there, and Air Commodore Mark Black's his book on the Malayan Emergency and the Indonesian confrontation will be launched at the symposium on the 1st. So all the details if you want to get on the website there. So thanks, folks. Our next Friends of Air Force History and Heritage Zoom will be on Friday, the 2nd of July, and we've got Doug Hurst lined up for that. So I'll send out all the details very soon. So as I say, thank you to everybody, and we'll see you soon.